Showing 11:03 on my system, so I'm going to start this meeting. So welcome, folks, to the Podman community meeting. Today is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. And today, well, actually, we'll go through this real quickly. Generally, we meet on the first Tuesday of even number months for the Podman community meeting. Odd number months, we do a cabal, which is more of a design kind of thing. We will move the timing from time to time to make it a little more friendly for folks in India, China, Australia. Topics are driven from prior meetings, or request to me, tsweeney@redhat.com, or we have the agenda. Feel free to go ahead, as some people have this time, to just go ahead and add topics there. Discussions will be accepted for Podman, Builda, Scopio, or any container-related projects, as you'll see we have a couple today. And then the meeting notes are in this HackMD, so I'll be taking some notes today just to make sure the AI doesn't fall down badly. And otherwise, we'll be using AI for the meeting notes, which is kind of neat and nifty and quick. So given all that, I'm going to try to stop sharing our screen. And our first topic for today is oci-dev-binder-hook demo by Roberto and Esteves, or Albert, I'm sorry. Feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Tom. So can you see my presentation?
Looks good to me.
Okay. So, then this is a proof of concept that we have been working the last weeks, maybe months, Albert and I. It's about dynamic discovery device, dynamic device access and management in containers. The challenge that we faced last year in our project that we are working right now, Albert and I work in automotive. So the challenge that we have is the containers by itself using Quadlet or Podman itself offers the way to introduce static devices using that device, right? But we face some situations where we don't know beforehand which are going to be the devices that are going to be placed there, because mostly we could have different boards, and the different boards show different devices, and we needed a way to, in some point when we want to show a demo in different boards, we need a way to dispatch these different devices, and sometimes it's not enough with the static that's device flag. An example that we have is, for instance, when we are using the QM container, the quality managed container, maybe we could have to give access to this container to the DRM cards or inputs or whatever. As I said, this sometimes change a lot before the devices. So this is the challenge, okay? The first thing that we thought when we faced the situation is, okay, let's not reinvent the wheel. So what can help us to solve this challenge? So first thing that we discovered is that in the Open Container Initiative standard defines a way to introduce hooks in order to modify the behavior of the container configuration even before the start of this configuration. This is part of the standard, and it could fit for proposal. Because what we could do is to create a OC hook using the press start stage and collect in some way the information of the devices that we want to use, okay, and inject it in the container configuration. Other technology that we thought that could be useful for us is, well, we thought, okay, this is Linux. We have been working with devices for a long time. We have technology to handle these devices dynamically. For instance, systemd and udiv. Udiv is the standard way to handle the devices in Linux. For instance, every time that you get up your Linux instance, you could see the udiv daemon and the systemd gathering all the UDIF information and all the devices information in order to well, sometimes it's in order to rename the devices or just in order to have an inventory of the devices. The other thing that we found, and this is very well one, is the multi-seat support in Linux. FreeDesktop defines a way to define a seat. Like, for instance, when you are running a desktop instance in Linux, you normally you are using the seat zero device, the seat zero seat defined by this, and that means from the point of view of UDIF, a set of devices that are attached to that session. Okay, so putting all together, all these technologies together, what we created is the oci-dev-binder-hook. The oci-dev-binder-hook is just a OSI hook. As I said, it triggers when the per start configuration starts. What this OSI hook does is to inspect the UDIF database, looking for the devices that you want to include in the container. Okay. And the funny thing about this is that it's so easy to configure because it's running outside of Podman because it's a different process. Podman triggers these hooks for each stage in the lifetime of the container. This hook can be configured using annotations. For instance, this is a regular Podman run command line, and we include this annotation indicating that we want to include all the devices that, from the point of view of UDIF, are attached to the seat zero. Okay. The good thing is that we use the current technologies, very, very battle tested technologies that we have right now in Linux in order to just to scan the tags or the information that we want from UDIF and attach those devices. A demo of this is the same as we saw later. Is if we have installed this hook, we can run this Podman container using Fedora. We added this annotation, and you will see that obviously my /dev/dir card will be present. Well, that more or less. What we would like to discuss is, well, first of all, if you like the idea about this hook, if we could have interest in to move this into github.com containers namespace. And maybe for the moment, we only implemented, because it's a very small process, we only implemented the semantic in order to include the devices related with the seat X, seat 0, seat 1, seat wherever. But maybe we could improve the semantics of the annotation in order to include things like, I don't know, a subsystem tag or a specific device ID or device category, or maybe I don't know, to include AI renders or whatever. So, well, it's something that we would like to discuss in the community. So I guess that's all. Thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Yeah, I think it's a decent idea. The question I have is that would just be at container creation time, right? So if I plugged in a new device and UDEV saw it, that device wouldn't automatically get added to my container.
True.
Is that a shortcoming of this?
You're right. It will only include the devices that are present right now in the system, but maybe we could improve the hook. Maybe not the hook, but we could use UDIF in order to, with the UDIF rules, in order to include devices that are hot plugged. Because in fact, that's another issue that we are facing with the QM container, because maybe we want to include inside things like, I don't know, a USB something, and that probably is going to be hot plug. So yeah,
Yeah, but
because
go ahead.
one potential option, and I don't know if I looked and Giuseppe's not on, but would be to somehow have a special Podman command where you could enter the mount namespace with privileges and add a device. I mean, I don't know how complicated that would be to the existing container. So right now, inside of the container itself, underneath its security controls, it has limited ability to create device nodes. But if you could enter the mount namespace, join the mount namespace of the container, but still have the privileges of the user or privileges of root, you theoretically could mount the new content if you're in rootless mode, or create the device if you're in rootful mode on the fly. So it's just it's interesting that does anybody else
That,
have any opinions on that?
So Giuseppe has been thinking about doing this as a dedicated OCI runtime command. He was initially thinking about it just for mounts, but I think it would be pretty easy to apply it to devices as well. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. And that strikes me as more natural than trying to do it through Podman. Like, I should be able to just ask the runtime, hey, can you add a new device for me? Hey, can you add a new whatever for me? And then we'll pipe that through to Podman. But I don't, basically, my point is I don't want to be responsible for this because we have weird VM based runtimes that don't have namespaces, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's a good idea. I could see us exposing it via Podman update, and then I don't know if we have hooks for that, but you could probably do some sort of service that just listens for new devices. And then if it detects any, it does a Podman update on the container and adds a device.
Well, would that add to a running container, or is that only that would
Uh,
run?
That's a good question. I think it would work on running containers, but that's another Giuseppe thing, and Giuseppe's not here.
Yeah, if you think about the use case with Auto is basically they have a running container that's running in the length of the car, and in this case, someone sticks a USB device in or something like that into the into the dashboard, and they would like to have that device show up so that a QM. For those that don't know, QM is the part of the car that's not functionally safe. So it's things like the radio and other types of apps. So in this case, you'd be plugging in a USB device that now you'd have your unsafe software able to interact with. So it's very legitimate that this use case would be something that for that. But I think in general, just having a way for UDEV to make devices available to containers that are currently running would be an interesting use case. But yeah, Matt, I would be fine with if we documented a way for CRUN to be able to do that, but to have some kind of tooling or scripting that would make that easy for the users, or at least example programs that use a CRUN or a runc to enter a current, the mount namespace and add a device.
I think this is more broadly applicable. Like I could see people doing this on their home systems if they plug in a USB key and they want to get to it in the container. So this is just, I think it's useful. I think it's something we should probably expose. I'm a little unsure about putting UDEV integration into Podman mainline, but the ability to update mounts on an
No,
existing
I'm just,
container,
I don't think it would be mainline Podman. It would just be whether or not you could expose a command that UDEV could then trigger, and then people could write examples. Basically Roberto here is doing is he's running a UDEV that's, you could have a UDEV script that just automatically looks for containers that have a certain annotation, and then adds the device to those running containers.
But what you are proposing, Dan, is instead of to have something looking for the devices, instead of that, having a Podman
I think a
command
combination
or something.
I think a combination of the two, because a hot plug event is going to happen after the container is started, but in your case,
True.
you want to basically have a list of devices that you want to have automatically generated when the container starts. Right, that is variable. So some way for you to list those so that they can either, I guess, UDEV will, once the container starts, add them, or so what you're doing right now is probably fine the way you did it for an OCI at start time. It just doesn't handle it. What I think is another problem, which is if one of those devices gets added after the fact, it does. You have to stop the container.
Yeah. In fact, I've been thinking about the hot plug situation for a while. I think that a way could be that you could annotate the container, providing some information to the running container. In order to have this information in the information structure in the container. On the other hand, you could have, I just said, a Podman subcommand or wherever in the UDEV rules, saying that if this device appears, I want to add this device in the containers that has these annotations.
Right. I think we're in
violent
agreement.
Could be something like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, the situation is the same. The difference is that we are, well, I mean, the life cycle is different because it's not the same when you have the device and you don't have it and you want to enable it, hot plug it. So obviously, it's not the OC hooks is not the way to handle the OC hooks. The OC hook is not the way to handle hot plug devices. But I think it's something that
we had it in our radar. I remember that we had it in our radar when we discovered OCI hooks. But yeah, unfortunately, the state says that the OCI hook enabled to inject the script are only before or after the creation of the container, so it won't work with that. But yeah, we saw it as promising, and the solution that we are discussing now sounds nice.
Yeah, I mean,
like something we could.
I mean, basically, you would do it as an OCI hook at startup, and then have UDEV, but the annotation be the way to figure out which containers you want to add these devices to.
Right.
We're starting to crunch up on time a little bit here, and we did have one open question about getting this into the containers org. Is that something, Brent, you can talk with Roberto or Albert about going forward, or what's the best way forward there?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Yeah, Roberto, you can hit me up.
Okay.
And I just sent his email in the chat there for you, Roberto. And is there any other questions or comments here? And I will ask Roberto if you could send me a PDF of your slides. I'd appreciate it. I'll include them in the meeting notes.
I will send it in a moment.
I'm not hearing anything else at the moment. With that, I will thank Albert and Roberto for coming here and presenting. It was a great talk. And we will turn it over to Anders, who's going to be talking about running Podman containers and in Apple container VMs.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Let's see if I can share my screen as well.
Oh, looks good.
See if we can start it as well. No. Oh, well.
It's very readable.
Can you see it even though I was unable to enter presentation mode?
Yep. Yeah, I think it'll be fine if
anyway.
you just scroll through.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about this new project called Apple Container. And it was something that Apple announced on the developer conference as a way to create and run Linux containers on a Mac using lightweight virtual machines or micro VMs. And it's written in the Swift language that you might not have encountered, and it's optimized for ARM. It's still only at version 0.5, but it's getting along very nicely. I will show you where it's at. It's similar to Kata containers, if you know that from before. So it's running VMs for each container. So it would be more accurate to say that it actually runs Linux container images. But that's a common mix-up between those two. It's also kind of similar to the WSL for Windows. Except in this case, we don't have a shared kernel. We have one kernel for each and every container that we start.
Would you say it's similar to Krun more than Kata? Or
yeah, it's similar to Run V and Krun, yes. Yeah, okay. Except that it's not OCI. Since it's written in Swift, they have done their own containerization library.
But basically, it's a kernel, and then it runs PID1 is the process inside the container.
Yeah, so similar to, it will actually use the Kata kernel, and then it will add init to the VM, and then boot the VM, and then add your rootfs. It does not read the kernel or the init from the container root file system. It will add them from the container system. So these containers, Apple containers, are fairly limited, especially on Mac OS 15. You need Mac OS 26 for all the features to work. One of the features is for one container to be able to talk to another container over the network. That does not work. Also, volumes were broken and there were users were broken. There were a lot of things broken, but 0.4 made it almost work, and 0.5 seems to be having the basics at least. So since this is a VM, I thought we would run containers inside of the VM. And it basically works something like this. You will run your Fedora, your operating system in your VM with a command called container run, which is very similar to Docker run or Podman run. And then it will start. And it's a micro VM, so it starts in a second compared to like 10 seconds or what have you on your regular VM. And then you have a fairly standard container environment where you can install Podman, for instance. And then you can run Podman. So that's simple, right? You run the container and then you run even more containers inside the container. And there was just one problem, and that was if you wanted to run the service, then you would try to start the socket, right? And then we would normally use systemd, but since this is using a special init system, also written in Swift, systemd will not cooperate since it's not been started with systemd. So we could have it as a workaround. We could start the Podman system in the background indefinite, and then we could connect to it, and we see that it has mounted the C groups and everything. So it was working this time for a while, but in the later versions, they have actually now added support for systemd as well to this VM initd. So the VM will boot with VM initd, do its stuff, and then it will hand over to systemd that will complete the process and start your various init type things. So since this is a container file or Docker file based system, it's at the moment it's bundling build kit, but they are rewriting their own build kit in Swift as well, so it will have a native builder. But we can make our own image, add systemd to it, set this as the entry point, and then we can run this. We can build this image and we can run it. And then we have systemd running as the main process. And then we can exec and start a bash, because the main console or what have you is now occupied by systemd, normal logging output. And then we actually have systemd running in the VM or container, what have you. And it works. And we can also go ahead and add Podman to the basic image installation. Then we don't have to wait for that as well. So we can bundle everything into this image. And we can also add, it's a fairly recent features, volumes are now working. So we can add a volume for storing our container images and containers on. So we have it on a separate disk from the root file system. And then you can mount it using a fairly familiar syntax from Podman machine init or even Podman run.
Are they using VirtIOFS for this? Do you know? Or
and it's VirtIOFS for the mounts. That is correct. And the interesting part is for the file systems, and for the file systems they are using ext4. so each of these systems is actually a separate image. So the kernel is added as a binary from the Kata containers, and then you have the Swift stuff, the init VM and so on. That's on an init file system, and then you have your root file system. In my case, it is Fedora. So all the layers from that Fedora image are unpacked and put into this root FS, and then you can edit that. And since I created an additional volume, that is another ext4 created in a separate namespace. So containers are under containers and volumes are the volumes. So it eats up a lot of disk, but I guess it's fairly performant. So there's pros and cons to collapsing the file system like this. Yeah, and as I mentioned, you want to run this on macOS 26. Everything I showed today was run on macOS 15, so it works, but it has severe networking implications, and they're not really accepting bugs. There was an issue open with Podman about adding support for this. My own goal was to try to add this as an alternative to WSL2 for the Lima project, so that you can run your VMs from container images instead of from the cloud images. And I also thought I would mention that it's the CNCF 10th anniversary, so we're also celebrating 10 years of Docker machine and Minikube machine and Podman machine and Lima. So been doing this for a while. And feel free to contact me if you think this is interesting. And there was a issue opened also for Podman as an alternative to Podman machine on Mac, but I think it was closed by Brent. So something to be discussed perhaps.
Were you able to get Podman machine, Podman remote from the host to interact with the Podman service inside of your machine? I mean,
yeah, so when I did it in Lima, I was just starting SSH on the VM. But I think you should be able to do it over Vert.io as well. It was just that it was quite buggy at the while with sharing files. So I went with the safe option, which was SSH.
Yeah. There is, by the way, I believe there's a Fedora-init container image that does all the systemd stuff for you. So you wouldn't have to, so if you're based on.
No, but it was just, you can add, I did one example where it's running kind, and then there's one when it's running Kubernetes and so on. So since it's a Docker file, you can fairly easily customize it. People have a bit more learning threshold when it comes to bootc and so on. So.
Does this container handle the multi-act stuff correctly? So
sorry, the multi, yeah, well, they only support one architecture.
Okay.
So it's only for Mac Silicon, but it's supposed to do it eventually. I think it's quite buggy at the moment. Yeah. It was pulling all the architectures from the registry, which was bloating the disk even more. But I think they are getting that fixed.
And they also don't handle GPU pass-through yet at this point, right?
No, not as far as I know. It's using the regular vSed. So everything that the virtualization framework on macOS does, it can do. But for Podman machine, we've dropped back to hypervisor framework to access GPUs and stuff. So.
And does it handle the stuff that GP proxy is handling, where if I bound to a port?
Yeah, so each of your VMs will get a proper IP on the virtualization network, but it's isolated from each other. So that was one of the reasons why networking didn't work on macOS 15.
Right, but if I wanted to just bind to port 80, run a container that's running Apache, and bind to port 80 and have that exposed to the Mac's.
Yeah, that's not handled for you either.
It's not handled. Okay. Yeah.
No. So I was using the Lima host agent to do that, but you can also use SSH forwarding or what have you, probably GV proxy as well. Yeah, but my goal is to have this on parity with WSL2, and I think it's more or less, it has the basics. And while I was debugging this or testing this, I also made it run with Kata containers. So you could run it on Linux, because WSL requires Windows and this Apple container requires macOS, but everything in CI and all the developer machines were Linux. So I wanted something container-based. So I was running Kata container or runv. There's also one older project called runq, which uses QEMU directly. It was kind of neat as well.
And how up to date is the kernel that's running in there? Is it
It's a slightly older version of Kata containers. You can build your own kernel, but you get, if I dump the kernel, it's 6 something, 6. I thought I had it in the output somewhere, but never mind. But it's fairly new, and you can replace it.
But could we do something with bootc type of thing?
You mean read the kernel from the image, or so in the container run command you have a -- kernel where you can supply your own file. So I guess you could extract it from the.
Yeah, but not automatically. Okay, yeah.
But not automatically, no.
The kernel probably has to have special flags to be able to support this, I would figure. But.
Yeah.
We're starting to run up against the clock a little bit here. Is there any?
Yeah,
I'll stop questions.
I will just leave you with the obvious.
Yes.
Bugs are not that, and well, yeah, containers are not virtual machines.
Very interesting.
Yes. Thank you, Anders.
Let's see
If you wouldn't mind, if you could send me the slides in a PDF, that'd be great.
Yeah, I will do that. Let's see if I can stop sharing as well.
All right, thank you. And our last topic for the day is from Hansa, talking about performances, that he's performance analysis on Podman build improvements. Hansa.
Yeah, sure. I will share my screen. Well,
You were trying to. Sorry about
yeah,
that.
okay.
I'm seeing ferns right now. I don't know if that
Well,
shows.
I cannot share.
Can you unshare me somehow? I will try to find my way back into Zoom and I see if I can do it.
Yeah, it should be at the very top of the Zoom window. It should be.
Yeah,
under
unless you hide it.
Yeah.
My screen.
There it goes. Thanks, Anders. Okay,
There
Hansa.
we are.
Okay. So, can you see the issue?
Yes.
Yes, great. So, behind my improvement, what I did is that when you are building image and you have big context directory, the Podman will copy all files which are placed in the context directory into virtual machine. Yeah, and this takes time. And if context is huge, it takes more time. So, and if you are not using all files which are in that context directory, you can avoid this using the Docker ignore file. But well, if you don't have this file, you will run into these problems with copying everything inside your Podman machine. So yeah, improvement is so I did this improvement in a way that I implemented a new API that that instead of getting a whole tarball with all context, will get paths to actual file, which should be mounted in VM, and use these files instead copying them. There is one catch with Hyper-E on Windows because P9 9P file system or protocol for file system doesn't correctly handles translation between NTFS file system to Linux Word. And VSL did this with new layer over this, and it is their proprietary stuff for VSL. So this doesn't work in Hyper-E. So yeah, this is sketch, but so here's benchmark, how I benchmark this improvement. So I will measure time, how long the build command takes, but here is context directory. The context directory contains 10 1 gig files and one Docker file, and Docker file just copied just 2 files inside the image. Yeah, this is pretty simple. And people who was on team demos already saw improvement for macOS, but as part of my thesis, I worked on tooling to run this benchmark automated, and also on macOS and Windows, and in the feature on Linux also. Yeah. So here are results for macOS. I run it against Docker to compare it. Same benchmark 5 times for each platform. And here are those results. Docker takes 31 seconds, which is pretty interesting how it works, because yeah, I will get to it later. And for Podman version 5.4, we get 73 seconds, and for custom version of Podman, which is built based on that PR, it took just 9 seconds. Yeah, which is pretty good improvement. Yeah, and here are averages of usage of CPU, memory, networking, sending and receiving, also discretes and writes. Yeah. And also here is comparison what it was different between each benchmark. Yeah. So there is only one small differences between host memory, which is 100 megabytes, which doesn't matter, I think. And also I run it with all CPUs for that VM, so 12 CPUs. And yeah, these are those differences, which are basically version, and that we are running Podman in AppHV comparing to Docker, which they use own implementation of this. And yeah, here are graphs for custom version. These are pretty boring because it was pretty close. Yeah, so pretty short. And but for older version of Podman, we can see here that most time was usage of CPU over the 50% because the files was put into tar file and then sent to VM. Yeah, and also, yeah, this is shown in network usage that lots of the resource of sending and receiving, these two overlying these two lines, so you cannot see the blue one for sending stuff. And it's also disk usage for all the version, and here is for Docker, and here is in the beginning also some huge usage of CPU, so probably Docker copied somewhere or do some transfer, but I didn't get how actually Docker is implemented and how Docker does this. And yeah, these are results for macOS. And right now, let's move to Windows. And on Windows, it is pretty different because it uses 9P file mounting file system, and it is pretty slow. So the differences is much smaller between older version of Podman and the version with improvement, just a few seconds. Yeah, and for Docker, it is, well, much bigger, or take much longer time. Yeah, and for this benchmark on Windows, I use as backing hypervisor VSL. And for VSL, I set globally 2 gigabytes and all CPUs for machine on which I run the tests. Yeah, and on VSL, I find out interesting stuff that when you put the limit VSL with memory, it start be slower. So I run also this with much higher memory with 8 gigs. Yeah, and here the times are slower, much faster. Sorry. Yeah. So here you can improve it also. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
I seem to be the only one talking, but I would, I mean, right now you're trying to do a real horrible case where you're not using Docker ignore, but I'd still think you'd get a speed up even if you were doing with Docker ignore, because obviously you're having to tar up those 2 gigabyte files, copying in, untar them into the machine, and then allow Podman
Yeah.
service to basically tar them up again to put them into storage. So you're doing twice as much work for the,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. But in this case,
Yeah.
well, I didn't
You,
use.
you're proving the point by making it
Yeah.
better. Yeah. No, but it was
Yeah.
good. I guess the only other question, does VirtIOFS not work on Windows?
Well, for VSL it doesn't. Well, it doesn't work, or well, it wasn't available for VSL. Yeah, at least on my machine. Yeah, I just run a Podman machine in it, and it doesn't dig inside that much. I just find out that on Hyper-V there is missing a translation layer over the 9p mount. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even on
general, there's no WSL. I mean, in general, there's no VirtIOFS daemon or implementation on Windows.
Okay.
In general.
even WSL is using 9p. It's admittedly a very customized 9p that's directly in the kernel, but it seems like that's just state of the art in Windows right now.
So
I guess WSL is open source now. Dan, you could do a VirtIOFS.
Yeah, my comments are no should not be interpreted as me volunteering to do anything. Just curiosity.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments here? Great, Hansa, thanks so much for doing that.
It's great.
Put Matt.
For the record, is this stuff going to be part? Is it part of 5.6 already, or are there still some things trailing to go in that we'll see in the next release?
Well, PR still waiting for reviewers. Yeah.
Oh,
I got 2 reviews from you and Addy, but yeah, missing LGTMs and or flags. Yeah.
Hansa, could you put the PR you're waiting for reviews into the chat? And
Yeah.
maybe we'll take some people up. I'm going to got pinged offline a little bit by somebody named Anders if there would be a Podman 6.0 update today. Matt or Brent, do you have anything to share on that?
The high-level design that we committed to is now in the repo, so you can see it lives in contrib/design docs, but the list of what we're hoping to accomplish is up there, as is the design doc for Conmon v3, which is one of the big features we're hoping to get in. On the whole, I'd say we're on schedule and sticking to our spring of next year timeframe.
there's also a new design document from John Hans on Quadlet RESTful API that went up today, I believe.
So I made a bunch of changes to the artifact command, and other people have. When could I see those in a release version of Podman? I mean, there's 3 more of them to go in, but
5.7 is second week in November, I want to say.
okay, so it's fairly close.
Except that the RC is being cut very soon, right, Matt?
Yes, so we will feature freeze and start cutting next week, I want to say. It's either next week or the week after. I'm not 100% on that, but we're getting very close to 5.7 feature freeze.
All right.
And then Dan, at that
Put the
time,
music in.
main is going to branch to 6. I mean, main is going to be a 6 development.
Right.
So 5.7 is the last. It maybe isn't going to be the last, but it's supposed to be kind of the last feature release. I don't see any reason why you can't get your stuff in. We just need people to review it. And on the one that you pinged me about today, Matt is going to review it as well as Nicola.
Yeah, no, the one I want really curious about is the one that got closed, but I don't know without comment. But
I think we can have someone take that one over. I think it was a community contributor who just didn't want to work on it anymore.
yeah, I mean, I'll take it over if that's the case. But I mean, it was 90% done. That's why it was surprising. But okay.
Well, just let us know, Dan, if you want to take it over or you want someone from the team to do it.
All right.
Actually, why don't you?
I can let AI do it for me.
No, I'd like to actually assign someone in particular on that one.
Wow. Yeah, if you got someone to take it over, that'd be great.
Yeah. I would imagine you'll see something tomorrow.
Yeah, as long as we can get it in for the next release, so I can move my release to Ramalama.
I have somebody in mind.
Yeah.
Mysterious somebody. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I guess the last one. So the last one to go in is basically on modifying the title field of the artifact. So I think we should have a quick discussion on that. So right now you could have conflicts on the artifact name. So it's brought for those that don't know, you can do a Podman artifact, add -- append, and then give a file name. And one of the changes I want to allow is you specify an OCI, basically a name for that object you're adding. If you just add a file to an artifact, it ends up being a checksum by default. And what I want is when I mount that into a container to have the original name. So say I add a file called foobar, I want it to be, when it's mounted into the container, to be named foobar. But if right now, artifacts does not have a rule that I couldn't add two objects to the artifact, both named foobar. And in that case, when I mount it, there's obviously, it's not going to work properly, and we don't have a defined behavior on what that would mean. For now, I would just fail and say you're not allowed to mount it because it's the same name twice. Potentially, or when you go to add the second file that's named foobar, then blow up. So it's either at creation time that we blow it up, or at runtime, when we try to mount it, that we blow up. The thing is, I can create an object like this outside of Podman, and we still need to blow it up when we mount it. So, I mean, we're gonna have to handle the mount case already. So the question is, do we want to check when you're creating it to tell them not to create two objects with the same name? Or do we just let them create them and then deal with it only if you mount it? Any thoughts?
I think in the Podman case, I would do both.
Yep.
And that covers then if they used like manifests to create it.
Okay. I'm fine with that. As long as we have that conclusion, I'll update my pull request to throw in.
Does anyone like Paul disagree? Or Nolan?
I think both makes the most sense.
Okay.
One last call for any other questions or comments while you're thinking about that.
I was going to say that I'm getting the topic that we are going to have to deal with, which is also artifacts. I'm getting questions from other interested parties on getting artifacts moved into container libs. And we've been hesitant to do so because we still were tweaking API, but I was thinking about proposing that we do that after the 5.7 release. What would others say? You think that's a good time?
I think if you do it after 5.7, which timing wise is now pretty much guaranteed, I guess. The thing is that the next version, like the entire branching strategy, follows Podman, so the next cut version on the mono repos would also be for Podman 6, so that could be a long time for whoever wants this new library using externally.
Do we have a way to wiggle that?
Well, we can cut a release, but I know if you're talking about the consumer cryo, we have the soft agreement to keep our versions locked, like synced, to not mess with the storage and so on.
Which is
so I
very
guess
important. When we don't hard lock these things, very bad things have happened in the past.
Sure, but we got to see a way through this. Okay, so I'll follow up with you guys, but the gist of it is, I guess we're less worried about what we were worried about before. Now it's more mechanics. Is that fair to say?
yeah, I mean, we haven't changed much there. So I think it's fine to move. It will still be the same pain of if we have to change something, but well, that's just how it is.
I guess that's APIs.
Yeah.
Okay, before we run out of clock here, I'm just going to point out real quick that our next project, Podman community meeting is on December 2nd at 11 a.m. Our next Cabal meeting is coming up next month on Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. One last call for any other topics. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording. Right, folks, thanks for coming today.